Is anyone here? Okay, we're on. We're live.
All right, cool.
We were just, thank you guys for being here. We were just talking about we both have very DIY setups for our phones today. Mine is on a box for a sous vide cooker.
So my phone, I was telling Andy that like normally my dog joins me for these things because he knows when the headset goes on that I'm doing either a work call or a Zoom call or a book thing, and he'll just pop in, like his head will just like float in, and he'll like try to lick me and stuff. But because I have this really delicate setup, and it's book related stuff too. Like I can't move it now, so I can't show you. But I showed Andy that I have for you picture book fans, or if you're a parent, Dragons Love Tacos. The author had this promotion on, I think it was on Twitter, where little jars of salsa that said Dragons Love Tacos on it, and I can very carefully rotate it. It says totally mild salsa on there. So that is propping up the right side of my phone. It's sitting on when appropriate to IP conversation, the Treasures of Rancho Obi-Wan, Volume 1, which I got at when I was up at Lucasfilm, which is about an hour from me, to talk about some of the stuff with my upcoming IP book, Star Wars Low Red Moon. But they had this bookshelf of stuff where they're like, we're moving offices and we have too many books in here. Do you want some? And so I grabbed this nonfiction book of collectibles, and now it's helping prop up my thing. So, hi, everyone.
It all feels like, hi guys, feels like a metaphor that you're like, we've both created like a careful house of cards tower that we're like topping our phones on. It feels appropriate. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. That's what Andy, I've told you this, privately, but I love your newsletter and your podcast because it's just like so fucking transparent about this stupid industry, which is just like, I saw some friends last week, and they're involved with the music industry, and I was telling them about how publishing works, and they're like, this doesn't make sense. I'm like, yeah, it's like more structured than music, but in a way it's like kind of more confusing because the structure is like this illusion of structure, which just really is.
It's like this illusion of like, we know what we're doing and we have a plan, and then like you go like a quarter inch below the surface and you're like, wait, what? Nobody has any idea.
Yeah, it's really just a lot of overpaid and underpaid and overworked staff just scrambling to keep their lives in order while the authors are like, I don't know what's happening.
It's a lot of people fighting for their lives,
Yes. Oh, and appropriate too. I got this Java the Hutt mug from the official Lucasfilm coffee stand when I was over there, so tying in with writing IP.
Wow. So basically what I'm taking away is we should all be doing IP for the swag. It looks like it's pretty solid.
Yes. Actually, so last week they announced my Critical Role. Like, I'm going to be in the upcoming Critical Role, The Mighty Nine anthology. And my wife was so excited about this because if you don't know, Critical Role is kind of like a spin-off of Dungeons and Dragons. My wife is obsessed with Dungeons and Dragons. She has been her whole life. She's played it her whole life. Suddenly, all of our Dungeons and Dragons swag that we buy is a business expense.
Yes.
and that's the best part about being an author writing IP. It's like all of your fandom shit is now a business expense, because if you even think about citing a character in like a figure or whatever, like if you need like a physical model to talk about, or if you take a promotional photo with it or something, it's a business expense. You used it for business.
Mm-hmm. You write it off. You just write it off, Jerry.
Yeah, that's right.
It is a write-off. I love that. Well, okay, we've got a good little audience going, and this is all going to be available afterward too. So I'm super grateful that you're here, because this is something I think a lot of authors and writers have questions about, right? We understand that it is a tough business, and from the outside anyway, it seems like this is a really cool way to potentially elevate your career, potentially to bring in some other, bring in money to capitalize on that like fandom that you already have. So can you kick us off before we get into all the nitty gritty of how you are specifically doing IP and how others can kind of follow in your footsteps? Can we just start with a quick intro of like who you are and Since we became friends as fellow 2019 debuts 6 years ago.
Yes, that's right. We debuted the same year. We went through all the shit together.
We sure did.
So my name is Mike Chen. I write primarily like this, depending on what subgenre you want to classify it as, speculative fiction or commercial fiction with genre elements or science fiction with literary crossover. It's like one of those three. My editors typically like to say commercial fiction with speculative elements because that puts me in the front of the bookstore when they categorize it.
Yeah.
I do have an upcoming, like, it is very science fiction because it's for Saga, which is a science fiction imprint. I have an upcoming space opera called The Photonic Effect, and that comes out in April. And I've written a lot of IP. I've written one Star Wars novel that's been published, two Star Wars anthologies, an upcoming Star Wars book, a Star Trek comics series, a Marvel book, and I'm part of the upcoming Critical Role anthology. So that's in addition to my original novels.
Yeah, you are unbelievably prolific, I have to say. It's always like, "Mike has another book that's incredible." Like, you're pulling it off, which is very, very impressive and, like, very indicative too of, like, the hustle that authors have to, keep going in this biz, which I love. But
It,
let's
my,
start
my
with
stock
go ahead.
my stock line when someone asks like how do you write so fast, I tell everyone because about 2 years ago we decided to send my daughter to a private school because they could accommodate our like medical needs as a family, and that shit's not cheap. And so why am I so prolific? It's purely practical. It is to pay for my daughter's education.
Yeah, it's usually not a very romantic thing. I mean, I've had not as
Yeah.
many as you, but 5 what is it? 5 books in 6 years, I think, because it was 20 yes, 5 books in 6 years, and people are like, "Oh my god, how do you write so fast?" And I'm like, "'Cause I have bills to pay." Like,
Yeah, yeah, because the
I don't wait till I
magazine
feel
industry
like
doesn't exist anymore.
right? Right, like,
Yeah,
cannot be sitting around waiting for inspiration to strike. Um,
yeah.
but let's go into more into detail of IP. How did you get into it in the first place? What was your first foray in?
So the first thing that I wrote was for the Star Wars. So from a certain point of view is a series of anthologies that documents the retelling of a film in Star Wars from the point of view of side characters. So they did a really successful one in 2017 for the original Star Wars: A New Hope, and then they're doing it for like the 30th anniversary of movies. So then for The Empire Strikes Back, I knew the anthology was going to happen, and about the writers were contracted like on a rolling basis in 2019, and so my agent gave me a heads up. So I'm going to rewind back a little bit from there, like how I got in front of the Star Wars editors. So when I first signed with my agent, he asked me what my dream project was, and I said, writing Star Wars. I said, in particular, I really want to write like a prequel, like Clone Wars era Star Wars. And so as he got to know the team over at Del Rey, now Random House Worlds, he would bring up, like Mike really knows this stuff. Like he's written for like Nerdist, and he's been a geek journalist for a while. Like he knows the community, he knows the stuff, and so he would send them my books, and I got to know Delilah Dawson and Chuck Wendig and Rebecca Roanhorse, and just like so they were kind of quietly saying like, "Hey, Mike should probably write something." And I was at a conference with Rebecca Roanhorse, and I told her I have this idea because these certain point of view anthologies, so they're like I think 30 or 40 stories that like break apart the beats of the film from a different character. And I said like I know they're doing the original trilogy right now, but on Twitter I'm going to pitch like my own version of it to get myself in front of the editors for like the Phantom Menace. And I'm like this way, like they'll see that like, I really know my stuff. And so Rebecca was like, "That's a really good idea, but you got to wait for the right time to do that. Otherwise, you're just going to be like tagging editors, and you don't want to be like that guy."
Right.
Um, and so, do you remember on Twitter around 2019 there was a hashtag Shoot Your Shot, and it became from Simu Liu when he was announced to play Shaw for Marvel, and he talked about how he took his shot with that. I forget specifically how he worked his way into. I think he posted on Twitter about wanting to do it, and it like got him like eventually to an audition. And so when that news kind of was publicly revealed, like everyone was like hashtagging shoot your shot. And I'm like, Delilah pings me, and Delilah Dawson's like, now is the time, post your thread. And so I did that, and I saw like, she retweeted it, Rebecca did, Chuck Wendig did, and then I started to see like Jen Heddle, who's one of the editors, and then Tom and a few other people who work for Lucasfilm or Del Rey, like they started to like the stuff on there, and so between that and like my agent, it was like they knew I existed, and that was really important.
Definitely.
And so yeah, so about 3 or 4 months before I got contracted to write for the second anthology, for The Empire Strikes Back. I remember my agent emailed me, and he's like, "Hey, just let you know that like they're doing another one of these anthologies, and I'm putting you on their radar. I can't guarantee anything's going to happen." And I'm like, why would they pick me? I'm like, this is before I think my debut had come out, but it was before anything else had come out. So I'm like, I'm just some mid-list dude who debuted. Why would they pick me? But then they picked me, and they gave me like this selection of characters to pick from. And so I'm assuming that some of our audience knows their Star Wars, and so the one of the names, a lot of it was just like background characters, like this person on the bridge of the Star Destroyer, or like this droid in the background here. But one of them was Emperor Palpatine, and I asked the editor, I'm like, why has no one picked Emperor Palpatine? And he goes, I think people are intimidated by like, because that's like, this is canon. Like, so you are affecting, the Emperor. And I gave 5 pitches. And Tom still gives me shit about how like no one else ever gives 5 pitches. It's always like 2 or 3. Um, and most of them were kind of like frivolous stories, but then like I picked one for Palpatine, and I made it like very, very important. It's the moment like in The Empire Strikes Back, the only scene Palpatine has is when he's talking with Vader about like they should hunt Luke Skywalker, and Vader's like, we should actually turn him, we shouldn't kill him. And so what I wanted to do, I pitched that moments before that, Palpatine through the Force discovers Luke Skywalker's identity, and it's because like Vader slash Anakin Skywalker can't contain his feelings about this. He's like so excited that he discovered who his son is, and then it kind of inverts the scene in the movie, because then
Mhm.
it's just Palpatine trolling him the entire time. And I thought, like, they're not going to let me do this. I am just some midlist dude. Like, this is a really important moment in canon. And like I pitched it with a lot of prequel tie-ins to Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala and stuff. And like they're not going to let me do this, and they let me do it. And because I was so like tuned into Anakin and the whole Clone Wars part, that's what led me to writing the 2022 Brotherhood novel, which is a Clone Wars Anakin and Obi-Wan. And then that led to the editorial team. They like me, and they also do Marvel over there. And so they asked me to do Marvel. I did the final original trilogy anthology, where I wrote Anakin again for the very end of Return of the Jedi. And in the meantime, so one of the things about getting into IP is like you have to know your stuff, but because of social media, editors kind of sense who knows what
Mhm.
and like what they're excited about. So parallel to Star Wars, like I'm constantly tweeting, like what do we call it on Blue Sky? Posting. I'm posting on Blue Sky now, constantly about Star Trek, and
Mhm.
the editor for IDW is a woman named Heather Antos, and we just followed each other from like fandom stuff, and she knew my previous work, she knew my Star Wars book, she knew my other novels, and she sees me just constantly tweeting about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And so she slides into my DMs, and she
Right.
goes, you seem to really enjoy Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I'm like, I do, it's the greatest TV show ever made. She goes, would you have time in your schedule to possibly write about it? And so that's why I wrote a 5-issue miniseries about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. So one of the first things I tell people is that like be unashamed of your fandom, like just like talk about it constantly because people in the industry are watching. And like even if you're not directly connected to them, if your discussions are organic and kind of draw the algorithm or the attention of other people in the fandom, like, people who work for specific IPs, they track the fandom. That's important because they have to market to that and they
Mhm.
have to see what people want. So if you become part of the conversation and you have a track record of being nice to work with, being good with deadlines, and really knowing your stuff, you have your in right there.
Yeah. I love that. There's so many points I wanna go back to. To start with the low-hanging fruit one, did you feel like this pressure to have stuff that you were saying about Star Trek go viral, or was it simply like, "I'm just gonna keep being a part of this community and engaging?" Like, is that sort of what you're
No,
looking for?
no, I don't think so. I think you really want it to be more organic. Though I
Yeah.
will say, so the show Star Trek Lower Decks, the writer Mike McMahon, so he already, I think he did Rick and Morty. Like he has a track record of being a writer in TV animation,
Okay.
but he had a viral Twitter account called Star Trek: The Next Generation Season 8, where he would just write goofy pitches about what a theoretical season 8 of Next Gen would be, and that actually got him the gig for
Wow.
writing or show running like Lower Decks. So, that's, I think like with that though, like it went viral, but I don't think he intended it to do that. I think he intended
Mm.
it to be like, "This is gonna be, like, my funny thing that I am doing." Similar on the nonfiction side, Kelly Knox, who is a really good friend of mine, she writes a lot of, like, nonfiction Star Wars books, and she had one that came out last year called Star Wars Dad Jokes, and she has a second, like, a dad jokes follow-up coming out next year, and that book came about because I think it was, like the middle of 2020 when like everything was like scary and terrible, and she wanted to bring some light to the internet, and so she just started writing a daily dad joke in Star Wars, and like it she did it I think every day for like 6 months or so, and because she had already written for, what is it, like, DK, it, like, publishes a lot of, like, nonfiction stuff. She wrote for StarWars.com. She writes for Crunchyroll. So she's, like, really pretty known in, like, among the editors of, like, the nonfiction world. And then, someone just someone in the editorial space said, like, "Hey, you did, like, all those dad jokes, like, would you feel comfortable, like, writing more for a book?" And she's like, "Yes, I would like to do that." And so these things happen organically, like, with Star Trek Deep Space Nine, I mean, I just kept talking about it. There was some reason why. Actually, what was like, we just rewatched it, and I was just constantly posting about my rewatch about
Yeah.
it, and constantly, like, trying to convince other people to, like, watch Deep Space Nine because it's often overlooked in Star Trek, and so these things are, like, they are organic, like, expressions of love
Mhm.
for the IP. It's not like I'm going to do something specifically to go viral and hopefully get in
Yeah.
front of people's eyes. Though, when I did the Star Wars thread, that was very strategic. Like, that
Yeah.
was like, I'm waiting for a moment where I can do this. But for other things, it's just like you see it quite a lot where it's like, I love this. I'm just going to talk about it because it's
Yeah.
what I love, and the world is terrible, and I'd rather talk about fun things for a little bit, and
Yeah.
people notice.
Yeah.
So but you have to back it up with like the track record of like being someone that they can trust.
Yeah. 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 You need all of those elements in place already. But I love that, just like demonstrating that you have passion for something because authenticity still, even now in our era of AI, everything authenticity comes through. Like it's what we're looking
Yeah.
for, in within a fandom, what those people, those decision makers are looking for. It's what readers are looking for in a book. Like it's going to show if you didn't have real enthusiasm. So I think that's kind of why um, you keep getting these great assignments that are like right up your alley, right?
A and I will say too, like, we can go into this now or we can save it for later, but, like, the turnaround times on IP projects are, like, insanely short, so you have to know the material really well, and you have to love it to let it consume your work time. Like you have to
Yeah.
put kind of other things aside for it. And so there have been IP projects where I'm like, I enjoy that, but I don't love it, and so
Yeah.
I would not be able to do it justice or commit to the turnaround time for it. So like I have
Mm,
passed on some stuff because of that. So like I do have a day job, and I think, like, if I didn't have a day job, like, maybe I could take on more of those offerings, but it's like you have to like, it's so intense for such a short period of time that you kinda have to be really selective of how you do it.
yeah, that's really great advice. Let's circle back to more of the logistics
Sure.
things because there was one question I wanted to ask. Back when you sent in your 5 ideas, when they were like
Mhm.
2 or 3 would have been fine, but cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, what did that literally look like? Were you writing full kind of treatments? Was it a paragraph? Were you telling us a whole synopsis
Mm.
or just kind of the hook? Like, what was that?
It was, so because each story in this anthology, I believe they were all 5 to 10,000 words, like, that's the preferred word count.
Mhm.
So I did, like, a paragraph each, and each paragraph base had like a basic story arc. So it's like if you extract that to like a one-page synopsis of a novel, just kind of like
Right.
shrink that down.
That idea, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, um, okay, let's talk about I'm sure I had other things during your excellent monologue that I wanted to ask, but I've forgotten them now and they'll come back to me. So let's talk
Yeah.
about logistics more. Like, okay, so they're like, Mike, great news. We really want you to write this book. What happens next? Is your agent negotiating? Is it like this is the flat fee? Are there in as much detail as you want to give us, like what happens in a business sense next?
It's generally um it's generally a flat fee. If you get royalties, they're really, really small. So for one of my projects, I got a 1% flat royalty on top of the advance. Um and it hasn't earned out but because 1% is not a like when you accumulate 1% of like every format, it's not a lot. I mean,
Right.
like one thing I think you and I have talked about and complained about like with this industry is the shift to trade paperbacks. And
Mhm.
one of the issues when you go from hardcover to trade paperback, we make a lot of money on hardcover because it's priced higher and the royalty rate is higher.
Yeah.
And when you combine that, like it helps us authors earn out much faster. When they pivoted to trade paperbacks, like the agents, I'm guessing, did not have the power to renegotiate that, and there's like this industry standard for a lower price point and a lower royalty rate, and I believe
Yeah.
it's like 10% instead of 20%, something like that. Um, and so when you're looking at royalty rates for an IP book, whether it's hardcover or ebook or whatever, um, like 1% is the best that I've seen. I've gotten it a few times, and like those projects haven't earned out, even though like selling like IP can often drive higher sales than you would with original work through sheer exposure and fandom, and even with that, like they haven't earned out.
Yeah.
So I look at it as basically like yeah, those royalties exist, but I look at it as like a work for hire.
Right. Right. Is it also work for hire in the sense that any subsidiary rights are out of your hands, or like if something
Yeah,
was made into
yeah,
a movie or whatever, it's like
yeah.
rights are handed
The,
over?
yeah, everything, and in like in Star Wars, like any original characters I created, like they belong to
They own them.
Lucasfilm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so it's like, in The Mandalorian in season 2, Cobb Vanth, who is played by Timothy Olyphant, who's one of my all-time favorite actors, Chuck Wendig created Cobb Vanth for his Aftermath trilogy, and I
Okay.
think Chuck did not know in advance, so he just shows up and he's like, "Wait a minute," and so, like,
That's
that's the dream. I think if you create something in Star Wars and then you show it, like, it's great when it pops up actually, in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, so the plot of my comic series is that a corgi gets rescued on on the station, becomes integrated into like war plotting and stuff like that. I heard that like there was a another comic that where they visited Deep Space Nine later in the timeline, and the dog is still on the station. So it's like that kind of thing is cool. you see it, I think, in Star Wars books. Like I collaborated with E.K. Johnston to bring some of her stuff because it was set around the same time period as my books. So I tried to bring some of her stuff in. I have passed some of my characters on, but any monetization of it, like if they made figures or whatever, I wouldn't get any of it.
Oh,
It just totally belongs to them.
okay, okay, that makes sense. And talk to me more about these really quick turnarounds. Like, are we talking 6 months? Are we talking 2 months? Are we talking weeks? Like, how does it actually work? And how do you produce that fast? Like, what's that process?
So for the typical, okay, so it varies depending on the licensee.
Okay.
Star Wars typically you get 1 to 2 months to make as detailed of an outline as possible, and the
Okay.
outline has to be iterative. So like when you make like the first draft, you fire it off to them, a bunch of people look at it, give you a bunch of notes, and then you build it out. And then you have about 3 months to write the 100,000 word manuscript. So I the good thing about that is I am so much faster of a writer because of that first Star Wars experience. Like I've taken that process of building, like I think my final outline for Star Wars Brotherhood was like it started off at about 5,000 words and it ended at about 12,000 words. And there was like there's like speeches
Yep.
and dialogue and like action beats and all this stuff. And when I was building it up, my brain was just kind of like dumping as much as it can in there with the idea that like you know I can summarize this for a synopsis level, or I can just put it here
Yeah.
and then use it later. So
Yeah.
it made more sense to do that, and also it gives the reviewing team like something that's more tangible. Like they won't have to review it again because like this speech has already been put into their hands.
Right.
And so your complete turnaround time is like 5 months. For I was writing, um, I was just finishing Light Years from Home when we got the first Star Wars uh, offer, and I was about to start up on Vampire Weekend. Um, and there was actually this concern where like I remember I was on the phone with my agent when like he was giving me the he was telling me about it, and we were doing homeschool at the time because this was I think March 2021, something like that. We were
Mhm.
still doing homeschool,
Yeah.
and so I'm like trying to keep my daughter on screen with her fucking homeschool kindergarten, which was just like a paradox. It doesn't really work. Um, and my wife comes downstairs and she hears me say Clone Wars like on the phone, and she's like, "Is that Eric?" And I'm like, "It's Eric." And she goes, and she hears me say something like, "I'll have to look at my schedule." And she goes, "No, we are doing it. You do it." And I'm like, and then so I tell my agent, I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to do it, but I have to figure this out." Um, so my wife was just like, even if you have to work evenings, like I will parent. It's okay. This is Star Wars. This is special.
Awesome.
Um, and so I talked with my editor. At the time, her name is Margot Mallison. She's freelance now, but she was my editor at Mira Harlequin. And I asked her like, "Can I get like a 4 or 5 month extension in my schedule?" And she talked with their team, and I said like, "This is for like Star Wars, and it's like it's a pretty big one. It's like Obi-Wan and Anakin, and it's gonna like they're gonna promote it at the same time as the Obi-Wan TV show. So I think like this is pretty big." And she said that like their marketing team was like, "Yes, do this. Let him do this because this is going to elevate his status, and we're probably going to be able to put like New York Times best-selling author on it because like that's about half of the Star Wars books hit the New York Times list." Um, so it was a strategic decision on their end. I actually had to go the other way around with my book that comes out in February is Star Wars Low Red Moon, and that is tied into the Outlaws video game that came out last year. And so we got word about this in May 2000. Okay, it's 2025 now. May 2024, like April or May, and my agent calls me and so the game came out in I think September 2024, um, and they wanted it to kind of like come out about a year after everyone like who's going to play like has beat the game.
Yeah.
Um, and so they called me and they said like this is April or May, and they're like, can you have a synopsis by June, and then the first draft by like September? And I was looking at my schedule, and I had just signed the contract for the Photonic Effect, and I was on sub for, or I was like, like offer but not contract yet
Yeah.
for my YA book that comes out this September.
Wow.
Um, and so I was like looking at this, I'm like, I can't do this. And like I don't want to turn down Star Wars, but I physically cannot do this. And so he told them that, and
He, your agent or
my
your?
agent told my agent told them that, and the editor working on this project was my editor for Marvel. Um, and she really wanted me to do this for some story reasons, based on like our Marvel experience together. And so they said like, what if we bump out our schedule 3 months? Can you do that? Like, and so I talked with all my editors,
Yeah, you've got like an
and like
army now.
yeah, it was like this shell game of like, what can I shift where? And everyone kind of agreed to it, and that's how that happened. I will say though, like with the Marvel one, because these Marvel books, they're the Marvel What If series. There's going to be 5 total books. I was book 3. Um, they are on more of like a traditional publishing cadence. It's still faster than original novels, but I got 6 months to I got like 1 month to conceptualize it and then 6 months to draft, which is um it's funny because like when we were first starting out, 6 months would feel insane.
Sounded insane.
But
Yeah.
now it's like, oh yeah, I can
Yeah.
fucking do that. That's fine.
That's very, very doable. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
wild. That was something I wanted to ask about too. I mean, it sounds like your trad publishing team was really into it, but I have heard, and maybe this is inaccurate, but I've gotten the impression that sometimes an agent is like, but your original editor is not going to be comfortable with that, or it might be a little competitive, or they might be upset that it's taking away from that publishing schedule. Like, was there ever any concern about that, or was the whole team kind of on it from, on board from
Not
this?
Not for me, and I
Yeah.
wonder if it's because, like, the overlap between potential audiences,
Yeah.
like, it could build on each other. Like, I have definitely had people tell me that they got to me through Star Wars, and then they found my other novels that way. And I think, like, there's nothing for my audience, like, if you like my Star Wars book, you will probably like my original novels.
Right.
And so everyone kind of wins with
Right.
that. I think if you have, like my friend Randy Ribbe, who writes like these brilliant politically focused YA novels, and like he gets like God, what's the like book of like the big book award for like book of the year or whatever? It's like the ones for like really important books that mean a lot to people. um,
Like
he's been
National
a
Book
final.
Award or
Yes,
Pulitzer.
yes, yeah, he's been National Book Award finalist twice
Wow.
for his YA work. He writes books for like one of his favorite properties is Avatar: The Last Airbender, and he's written, I believe, 3 books for them, and he does it because he just fucking loves it. I think like the crossover audience from that isn't quite as direct. So someone like him might have more considerations between the editorial teams, but for me, it's like you know there's just a lot of like overlap between it, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of cross selling going on.
Yeah. Yeah, and you said something interesting too of, like, people who told you that they were finding out about your other book coming to your other books via the Star Wars or the IP stuff.
Yeah.
Not that we can ever with any, can ever definitively say what impacted sales, but do you feel or have you seen, et cetera, that, like, your original books or your backlist has seen a boost specifically from IP projects?
I don't think like like your so the Harper the Harper portal is not. Are you with Harper? Is your
I'm with,
stuff with Harper?
Penguin Random House.
Okay, the Penguin Random House portal is really good. From what I've seen with my work with Del Rey, the Harper one is a little bit more nebulous. So like I can't really tell. I know it sounds like I believe my backlist has benefited from that, especially like the best part, the easiest way to go from like a Star Wars reader to backlist reader is an ebook sale.
Mm,
Because like it's like $1.99 for people or $2.99 or whatever. This is like much less investment for them, and so if I this is a sidebar, but I tell people the only time social media actually sells books is those ebook sales because it's cheap enough that you can get the impulse buy. But
yeah,
otherwise, it's like, your social media campaign might get you like hundreds of books at best, but it's not going to list you in the way that you think like all that effort will do. It just it just doesn't. But
it's
with
not gonna,
these
yeah, move the needle, as they say. Yeah.
yeah, but the ebook sale because it's so cheap, like, you can generally get a good number of sales for that. So, I think, like, backlist, particularly that route has helped out. It's weird because, like, my sales have, like, they've, like, organically grown with each title,
Mhm.
starting from it's like, I got lucky. I mean, this is going into, like, industry weeds, but I got really lucky with my debut, um, because on my 3rd month, which is traditionally where, like, sales start to flatten out, I got picked for, like, the Barnes& and Noble, like, 2 for 1 sale or whatever for the month, where
Yeah.
they put your book front of table with, like, "This is our 2 for 1 table." And, I think, like, that's probably, like, the biggest thing for my career, and it's such a in the weeds industry thing, but like, I think, like, that basically doubled the lifespan of
Mhm.
my debut, and that, like, powered so many more people saying yes to other
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
So, but, y like, the publishing has ups and downs, as you have talked about quite openly, but I think my first Star Wars book came out in 2022, and you can see there's a pretty steady, like, backlist, like, bump cycles with like when these ebook sales come in.
Okay.
And I think the titles from there have kind of like organically grown. It just as like cumulative, growth of people reading.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's great. That's the dream, right? Of just, like, the steady building, the long, like, over the
Yeah.
long haul, right? Like, in it for a career. Um
Reliably mid list.
Reliably, those just middle managers, there we are,
Yeah.
just we keep writing, we keep doing it. I have 2 questions for you, and then I wanna open it up, so if anyone, start thinking of questions and we can, try to address them from the comments. One of them is it's accurate that all of your IP stuff has been with, established sort of canons and worlds, right? Because there's also people
Mm,
who do IP
yeah.
work that's like
Mhm.
a book packager, or there's, somebody comes up with an idea and then hires an author to write it, and then they're sharing in the profits. Have you looked into any of that, like talked about any of that, or have you just squarely been like, I want to be writing within these worlds that I'm
I
interested in?
have I have been solicited for pitches, and there was one project where we actually like we turned it down.
Mhm.
Um, And it's really good to, like, kind of delineate, like, because 'cause I've had friends, I'm sure you have friends too, who've worked for these book packagers, which they seem like when they get published, it feels like a standard, like, traditional published novel, but, like, the genesis of the project came from the publisher, and then they solicited, writers to, like, send them a pitch, and then the writer gets a lot of leeway on how they do it as long as it kind of fits in with the parameters of it. So it is similar to franchise IP, you just take the franchise out of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Um, actually, so it's funny because in a roundabout way, I got solicited for one of these with a major IP. They were thinking about doing a YA line, and I hadn't done. Actually, no, it wasn't a YA line. It was they were thinking about novels, and they hadn't gone into characters that I had set in Here and Now and Then, my debut novel. And so I wrote them this pitch. and involve these characters. And some people have figured it out, which is kind of cool. Um, but then they just shut the whole project line down. Like it just didn't go anywhere. But I really liked the idea, and so that actually like I de-IP'd it, and that became a quantum love story.
Oh, that's really cool. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll share my I've had 2 experiences with IP that didn't happen as well. One was, that my a request came in from my agent specifically for me for, something that was kind of in my wheelhouse. It was an idea that a book packager had, for a sort of feminist psychological thriller. And so I got as far as, and now looking back, I'm like, I probably should have done maybe that much free work, but I had calls with this editor whom I liked. I made a pretty detailed synopsis and a sample, and then the idea was that she would go out with it, like any other book, and they would try to get a book deal, and then we would be sharing in the profits from it. And what was cool too was that this packager also had a big foot in Hollywood, and so they sort of
Mhm.
developed projects with the intention of then getting it made into
Oh, I've
film.
had a friend do something like that too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I would be sharing in the profits should it get made into, I would also sort of, I wouldn't be totally cut out if it were to get adapted, which was cool. And it ended up,
Mhm.
it sort of spread out too long. They were holding back for whatever various reasons. And then it butted up against We Were Never Here. And finding out We Were Never Here was going to be a Reese pick. And so my agent was sort of like, you know what? Like, this was all a different discussion when you were an unknown. Like, let's focus on you and your books right now. So that one
Yeah.
didn't happen. And then the other thing was that a publisher had an editor that I sort of knew was developing a new line that I don't think actually has launched yet, and I will be kind of purposely vague, but it was going to be an adult line, a line of adult books that were like the novelization of movies. So
Mhm.
they would be sort of written at the same time that the film was being produced, based on the script, and then they would come out around the same time. And that's a thing that has been done before. You can go pick up a novelization of, I know Evelyn Skye wrote Damsel. She wrote a book that came out around the same time that had a richer world, right? And like followed the story, but built
Yeah.
upon it, etc. Um, so it was a thriller script that was up my alley, and we would have had to discuss. It would be a kind of a flat fee thing. It was going to be 3 months, and I was like, I think I can do this. I think this is up my alley enough. And then, as is often the case with everything in publishing, it ended up just like we didn't hear anything. We didn't hear anything. My agents following up, and then finally they were like, actually, we're not going to do a novelization. We decided, so never mind.
Yeah.
So
Did you
like,
find
go
with the
ahead.
package, or did you find because like the times that I've been solicited for that, one time it was I think there was like a 1 year turnaround. It was pretty like standard, novel turnaround. Another was like more compressed. I think it was like 4 to 6 months. So I'm guessing like with the book packagers, they're not necessarily. It's not like franchise IP where we're marketing to coincide with a TV show or a movie. We have a set deadline. With them, it's just whatever their internal schedules are. But I was curious, like, did you kind of get the same sense?
So they didn't actually give me a big sense. I think because all I was going to do was they were going to go out with the synopsis and the sample, as far as I
Mhm.
as far as I understood, and then they were going to make a deal with, hopefully whatever publisher wanted to do it. So I had the sense that from then on out it was going to work more like a traditional publishing deal, where like
Yeah.
whoever picked it up, Random House or Simon and Schuster or whatever, would be like, okay, here's where we see this book that happens to be from both a packager and author Andrea Bartz. Here's where we see it slotting in, and this quarter of this year in the future. And so based on that, here's your schedule for it. And I would be working with the editor, but I would also have the people from the packager like in the room. I have some friends who've done the YA thing, and they're kind of like done YA projects with a book packager, and they're kind of like, it's cool and sometimes frustrating that I get to have these other like smart creative people in on it
Yeah.
with the discussions, with all of that. So in a sense, you're pleasing more people, which is tricky, but in another sense, you have more people to bounce ideas off of and more people invested
Yeah.
in the story. So a
It,
different
it's
way of
an
doing things.
interesting it's an interesting world, like the book packaging world. And I don't think most people like it doesn't get talked about a lot,
Mhm.
but it's an interesting way where if you've established some reputation in the industry, I think when you get approached for it, one of like the secondary like perks of that is just kind of like this idea that like people trust you.
Mhm.
People trust you enough to be approached for like this like known quantity, which I
Yeah.
think like is like says something about like where you are in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. Although at the same time, this is just reminding me that when I was more recently in that discussion about the novelization of a screenplay,
Mm.
um, my agent brought up like maybe this would be one to do with a pen name, just because it's a little bit, it's kind of your genre, but we don't know if we want it to be your next book. That could lead to
Oh,
problems with you being on a two book contract now with, a
yes.
different editor. And so again, like none of it ended up panning out. And she was like, I'm not saying we have to do it that way. If it's a discussion we would need to have. But that is also, I imagine there are other authors out there who are doing IP projects under a pen
Ye
name and everyone's kind of like, I feel like that happens in YA. Like everyone's like, who is that fake name? Who's behind it really?
Actually, so this is an interesting, point you bring up because it's like to separate, like,
Yeah.
the internal operations where, like, editors want these authors with reputations where, like, we know that, like, you're easy to work with, you can hit deadlines and you're open to collaboration because like not every author is open to collaboration and sometimes they're just surly assholes. So you have to hit those things in order to build the trust because these projects like they come with more stakeholders and often tighter timelines. And then there's the external part facing the consumer about like do we put the name on there and how does that impact your other contracts
Yeah.
and like your persona out in the world. So yeah, that's an interesting thing to explain about IP because it's like no one talks about this.
Yeah, yeah, it's stuff to think about, it's stuff to talk to your agent about. I mean,
Mhm.
absolutely, like, my next kind of final question for you is, like, what's all your advice for somebody who wants to get into it? But I feel like something I'm often saying when people are talking about different professional things they can try and directions to take, it's like, go to your agent, have your
Yeah.
discussion with them. They're your talent manager, like, be open and honest and, like, talk about what that could look like, but beyond that, as the actual expert, like how would you what's sort of your top level advice for people who are like, "Mike, I wanna do what you're doing."
I think like actually talk to your agent is really important because I know like some agents actually frown upon IP because they feel like it's just taking time out of your schedule and there's no royalties involved. So if you want to do IP and you have an agent, um tell them you want to do IP. So like it was really important for me early on with my agent where I said like these are the IPs I'm really interested in.
Mm,
Can you put me in front of their teams? And so if my agent is talking with them about like another project that's not um and just talking with the editor and be like by the way, I know you own the rights to like this property is really interested in it if an
mhm,
opportunity comes up. So, like, that's really important because you can't get in without that professional gateway. And
mm,
I think that's one thing that here's something that people need to understand about IP. Like, I will have, in real life friends and then also people on the internet say like, "Hey, what do you think about this idea for Star Wars or Star Trek?" And I'm like, "I literally cannot read it." And if people send in things to like the editorial team or pitch them on Twitter, like they're not if it's in an area where they have projects developing, like they can't acknowledge it
mhm,
because for legal purposes, if they put out something similar, like they're like just completely by coincidence, like if it has nothing to do with like this person's email that they sent in,
right.
there's still like that person will be like, "Whoa, they stole my idea," and they're like, "We didn't," but like that's why like they have to have the receipts that show like they didn't even open the goddamn email. So
Uh,
like that's sort of protection right there. But that's also why like they go through the traditional structure of like you need to have an agent. Your agent has to connect with the editorial team. And I often find that like there's a reason why you see kind of like the same authors in like the circle of IP, and it's not because we favor it's that like they know they can rely on us for speed and easy to work with and being collaborative. And it's harder to break in some who is newer to that, and you have to kind of like rebuild that rapport. But like having worked with the Del Rey team on 5 projects, 6 projects now, actually, if you're including Critical Role. Um, and like there's been I think 3 different editors across that, but like, their internal staff meetings, like they can say like, "Oh yeah, Mike is really good at like voice and characterization, and he's like he doesn't get offended when you say like we can't do this, and he's really fast." So like knowing that kind of builds your reputation on
Yeah.
like internal operations teams. So my advice to people is like to have your agent tell them that like you want to be involved with this property. Understand that you cannot do this without an agent. Like they shut off that gateway because they otherwise like if they said like yes we take unsolicited um or if we take like unagented solicitations, just pitch us. If they did that, they would get this deluge of crap, and all of that is like a legal nightmare to untangle. So like they use the agent gateway for that reason. So be nice to your agent, be nice to your other editors, be nice to your colleagues in the industry because people, as we often say, people talk, and your reputation of being difficult or being nice or being fast, like those things will feed into whether or not they're going to trust you with something with an extremely tight turnaround. And like I said earlier, like be very vocal about the things that you love because like even from an art perspective, I know several comic artists who started off more as like just fandom illustrators and like
Mhm.
they're doing stuff at cons, they're doing stuff for hire for fans, but they're posting their stuff online and they're like, I really love Star Trek, and here's like my portrait of Jadzia Dax or whoever. And they through that they get contracted by the editors at IDW to do Star Trek comic covers.
Wow.
And so it's like just the natural expression of your fandom, and it's like I think that's pretty much how Randy got Avatar is because he just fucking loves Avatar: The Last Airbender and was like very like vocal about it, and his agent knew it, and so they found whoever got had the license for it, and like that's how they connected. So those are the most important things. So it's like have an agent, be nice, and be ready to do like the logistical things about like you have to go fast, and that's not easy, and so you're going to have to like balance that with the other parts of your workload.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great advice. Do you recommend that people, I mean, of course, if you're a big part of this fandom, you should be like reading all of it, like being involved with all of it, not just like you watched the Star Wars from the 70s and that's where your knowledge stopped, right? Um, do you recommend like trying to build a community and rapport as well with like the other authors who are kind of doing what you're doing? Or is it more about um, interacting with the entire sort of fan community and seeing yourself maybe less as a peer in that context and more as a part of the fandom?
I think it's both. I think like because like in general, the people who write the stuff really love the stuff, so they're kind of involved in the fandom conversation
Yeah.
as it is. Um, so I think it's like just don't be weird
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
like be organic, be friendly, and it's like it's really important to like champion stuff. I think one of the things, I mean, like everyone, there are things that I enjoy and don't enjoy about whatever IP it is, like any
Mhm.
IP.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's actually helpful, and this is something that I started doing even before Star Wars, but like when I got became a professional creative and I realized how many people are working so hard to like put things out. And I just stopped like publicly shitting on stuff that I didn't like because it's like even if like, even if there's like a TV show that I don't like or like I had a big problem with a certain episode, there's so many reasons why something goes wrong in a creative thing. Like, there's like in a TV show, like you have the actors, you have the director, you have the studio giving notes, you have time constraints, you have the people who are just like holding the goddamn grip in the rain, things like that. And it's like people work really hard on this, and this is one thing I always take with me. That story, as shitty as it is, whatever it is, someone out there really loves it. Like it might only be one person, but someone out there really loves it, and you don't want to shit on something that like means something to someone else. You
Yeah.
can talk about it privately and criticize it, but I think like if you're someone who um, is trying to get in this, and you want to be known as like not being difficult, like being a positive presence online and like cheering on your peers and engaging in the fun parts of fandom rather than like I'm so mad that like this one thing kind of but not really broke canon from like 15 years ago, and and here's how I'm going to rile people up about, like, don't be that guy, because like one, the world does not need it. I mean, like, things are so bad in the world that like we really don't need to nitpick that shit. And two, like, professionals who are associated with that IP are just going to be like, I don't want to work with that person, they seem like a
Yeah.
dick. So yeah, don't be a dick online.
This is like really good general advice, but also specific
Yeah.
advice. Like, don't be a dick.
Yeah. Yes,
Don't be
don't
that
be a
person.
dick.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Well, I want to be cognizant of your time, but in the last 5 minutes or so, like, are there any questions that anyone wants to drop in the comments that Mike can weigh in on? We'll give it a minute for that. And again, this entire conversation is going to be available on my Substack afterward. It'll go out later today as a video. It'll get uploaded to YouTube and to the podcast thingies if anyone wants audio only. So if there's anything you missed or want to revisit, good news there. I am babbling as we wait to see if anyone wants to drop anything. Um,
See, this
and
would be a good time for my dog to invade, but he's in the crate in the other room.
if only, if only. Well, as we're wrapping up, can you just share like where to find you, the quick pitch for your next book or books? Like, kind of, how can we throw a spotlight on your amazing work?
So, God, my agent was giving me grief about not updating my website, but my website is about a year outdated. But it's mikechenbooks.com. That's like the most like central repository for my links and stuff. I am mostly active on Blue Sky because, unlike Andy, I like am terrible with Instagram and don't know how to use it other than posting pictures of my dog. But I
Well,
am
you
on
gotta do that's
Instagram.
good.
That's true. That's my brand. Um, Mike Chen Writer is all my socials. I have a Threads account, but I never use it. But Blue Sky is Mike Chen Writer. Instagram's Mike Chen Writer. So my upcoming release schedule, I have 4 releases next year, which is going to be fucking insane. Um, Oh, I see, like, people are subscribing to, like, my Substack account, like, it exists specifically for this conversation, so please don't expect, like, I have a newsletter that's still on MailChimp that I haven't updated in, like, 2 years, but so, like, all of these things, I should get on them at some point.
Uh,
Um,
you're a little
okay, my
busy.
upcoming release. Yeah. My release schedule for next year, February 3rd, is Star Wars Low Red Moon. That is the tie-in to Star Wars Outlaws, the video game. If you like underworld Star Wars stuff involving like the Criminal Empire, Kira, who was Amelia Clark's character that was in Solo and also in Outlaws, like those types of characters, you're going to dig this. It takes place about 10 years before the original trilogy, so at like the height of what you saw in Solo, in between the trilogies. So it's a very criminal underworld based story. In April, I have the Photonic Effect, which is now available on NetGalley, and it's my Star Trek inspired original space opera. And also, if anyone here is a music nerd, one of my favorite bands, Rilo Kiley, is a plot point in the future, and Rilo Kiley saves the galaxy because they're really fucking great. And I just saw them in concert a month ago. In June, the Critical Role anthology, The Mighty Nine Stories Untold, that gets released. There's, I believe, 8 other. Yes, there's 9 stories for the Mighty Nine. I am telling the story of shopkeeper Pumat Sol and his 3 clones who also help run the shop. It's very cozy. Um, and then in September, my YA debut is called Of Sorcery and Science. And that is a portal fantasy, but it's mostly on the contemporary side. It's about a high schooler who got sucked into a fantasy world, kind of became like their chosen one hero, learned how to cast magic and everything. But this is the story after, because he comes home and he's still just this high school junior who sucks at trig, and his Asian parents are giving him grief about college applications, and he's just kind of miserable. And he's like, wait a minute, I defeated the freaking chaos dragon and saved the world. why am I doing trig? So that's in September. Yeah, so it's a lot of stuff. It's going to be a busy year. So I just don't want the world. I don't want the world to end, and I don't want us to all die before all that comes out.
Yeah, we got to hang on at least through your YA debut, you know?
That's right. Yeah.
Like society cannot crumble before then. Well, thank you so much for talking with
No.
me. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for jumping on with me. Thank you so much for sharing so much awesome information about how you got into IP and what kind of advice you have to share with others. And I hope that this becomes, yeah, a great resource for people to keep coming back to and learning from you. But everyone, go buy Mike's existing books and go pre-order Mike's upcoming books because they are so fun. They are great to read. My mom is Mike's biggest fan. True story. She has like reached out multiple times because she's a sci-fi aficionado. So if any, if that endorsement doesn't do it for you, I don't know what will. But
hello, Mama Butts.
Mama Bites is always paying attention. But yeah, well, thank you again. Thanks to everybody who joined. And I hope everyone has a great week.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Bye.